Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Konstantin
You're not
Garrica.
wearing your boots.
Sorry, no. Oh yeah, they asked me for my shoe size, but they never got me anything. That would have been nice. I might go chase them up afterwards. So we've got Konstantin Garrica here, who has had a pretty amazing career. You had a home run at your first time up at bat, I would say. You were one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, which is, of course, massive social network, doing extremely well, getting acquired by Microsoft now for $26 billion. You haven't been there for a while. But since the subject of this is failure and startups and so on, is one of the themes of this conference, and how to learn from it, of course. I kind of wanted to go back to those early days when you were there. Now, when you first started, you were, if I'm correct, you kind of came up with the idea yourself for this, and then you linked up with Reid Hoffman. You were working on something, or you were thinking about an idea called People Map?
Yeah, I would say there's several things that came together. We're a founding team of 5, but I had worked at another startup, which was a virtual reality startup, and the founders had started GeoCities. And so I was thinking about, what about a professional version of that, where GeoCities was a page, we could have your homepage. It's like having a professional homepage.
Right.
At the same time, there was a company called BranchOut, where you could sort of connect with other people on the internet and find other people that could be helpful to you. And sort of bringing these things together, as well as sort of a self-updating address book, in a way to navigate. The name People Map comes from, wouldn't it be nice, like the web connects web pages, to have sort of this visual where here's a person and you can see like a web, and here's this person, here's that person, just like the web is connected, having that with people. So kind of putting all these things together, the idea was People Map, and that was pretty early on. So, but we all came at it from different angles. We all experienced the pain in startups to find the right people for your team and for introductions and so forth. So it was really, we all came in from different angles. We all saw the same problems and decided we should do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting to me because when you guys were coming in, there were already, I think it was Friendster was pretty big.
Yes.
There were already social networks, maybe not, Facebook yet, but there were already the beginnings of what we would call today social networks. And some people even then were looking at you guys as a bit Me Too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Friendster now, the way you make it sound like Friendster is like, this little thing.
Yeah, I mean, does anybody know what Friendster is? I mean, it doesn't really exist at all anymore.
Friendster was huge.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was
I'll tell
massive.
you when, we launched and we grew for 6 months, and when we got the funding from Sequoia, we had 40,000 members, and Friendster had 4 million. So they were 100 times as big. Facebook was usually just like, 5 or 6 times as us. So Friendster loomed very large, and there were all these Friendster copycats. So, one of the things we had to really consider is how do we get not viewed as another Friendster copycat?
Exactly.
And one of the decisions we made was to not have photos on our profiles. So for the first couple of years of LinkedIn, there was no photos you could add to your profile. And a lot of bloggers said, these guys are completely stupid, because that's the whole reason Friendster took off, is because you had a photo on the profile. Because there were social networks before Friendster. 6 Degrees existed many years before. So it's not about who's first, because you always take an idea from something else. But Friendster took off because of the photos. We deliberately left it off, because just saying we're different, we're for business is not enough. But when you have no photo, people notice something is different about it. So people right away got the idea. It's like, this LinkedIn must be different than Friendster.
Did you try to go for something like a little more serious? I mean, I kind of vaguely remember those early days of LinkedIn when people were starting to send out invites, and I used to get it confused with Plaxo, I think it was called.
That's right.
And there were a few other things like that. But I mean, how did you go from being this kind of like network that was trying to just differentiate itself to being something unique? Like where does the Me Too at what point were you deciding that you needed to start adding more features in rather than taking out features?
Well, we often would get caught in between, not being Friendster, but then people would say, because people often had a horrible impression of Plaxo. I mean, the people who used Plaxo loved it.
Plaxo was totally pointless, I found.
The people who used it loved it because other people would update their address book for them.
Right.
But the people who they asked other people to update it for them, they did not have a good experience.
Right.
So we got caught in the middle. And we did not really focus on features because in the beginning, our simple strategy was growth, engagement, revenue. And we saw how Friendster had grown, and so we had sort of this timeline, how long it would take. The problem was growth took a lot longer. Because the reality is, when you get an invitation to something like Friendster, we can see your friends and photos on the profiles and maybe who's dating whom. That's pretty interesting. If you get an invitation, the first thing is you have to put your resume up there. That is not very interesting. In fact, most professionals think putting down your resume is kind of like a root canal. This is not what you want to do. And nothing good happens after you join LinkedIn. Often the first good thing that happens after you join LinkedIn is like a couple years later when a recruiter calls you 2 years later. So it's very delayed gratification. So our growth phase took a lot longer than we anticipated. And you do need to get to revenue at some point, even with patient investors. So we basically had to skip the whole engagement period and go from growth directly to revenue, which was kind of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I was reading about an interview with you from, like 2006, when you were still at LinkedIn. And you were going off on one about how you thought ad-based revenue models were kind of like not the way forward, that you needed to have premium services.
Yes.
Obviously, we've come into this kind of world of freemium, and these a lot of services still are massively ad-based, Facebook being one obvious social network. Do you still agree with that? Do you still think that companies need to have a revenue, like a paid service involved, or sort of alternate revenue streams beyond advertising? Or do you think ad-based has come into its own?
Well, I think I was talking about us, for us. And because I know the professional space, the networks, you can create a lot of value where people are willing to pay.
Right.
And our goal is not to engage people and have a bunch of time clicking around on our site looking at stuff. And we don't have that opportunity. So the opportunity we have to make every click count and deliver a lot of value. So that aligns with a subscription. And LinkedIn's revenue, 80% is based on subscription.
Right.
And as an entrepreneur...
Even today. Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, I really like, as a personal preference, I prefer creating a service where I know users are paying me for it. Mm-hmm. The satisfaction of knowing I'm creating something, someone is paying $100 a month, $500 a month for my service feels very good.
Right.
The other alternative is I am giving someone a space so that Gap can sell T-shirts for $20. They're not willing to pay me, but they're willing to pay Gap $15 for that T-shirt.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel as good to me.
Yeah.
That's just my personal preference.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, even what you said 10 years ago.
Well, we'll repeat ourselves.
If I remember correctly. Okay, now, what was your moment at LinkedIn? So, I mean, we've got a lot of people here who are building companies, and there's going to be like a ton of struggle while you're trying to build scale or whatever your endpoint is, whether it's profitability amongst a certain group or mass market achievement. What was the moment at LinkedIn when you guys were like, we did it? Was it when you became profitable, or was it a certain user number, or was it a growth curve that you reached, or when did you start saying, yeah, this is it?
I'd say there are 2 points. The first one is because we kind of started a little bit behind the curve. There were professional networks that were ahead of us.
You were not an early adopter, early mover.
We were not the first ones.
Yeah.
There was Spoke Networks, there was Rise, there were a couple other ones ahead of us. So we had to kind of catch up. And network effects are great when you are the leader. And LinkedIn is in a very strong position, has been for the last decade. Because even if there's other networks who have better features, most people are sort of like, well, I'm already on LinkedIn, why should I join this other professional network now? But when there's other networks where people are already on, that's a bad spot to be. So we had to really get the membership numbers up. So the first years was very precarious. So once we sort of passed the other network and we could see by the monthly ads we were doing that, that was step one. That was sort of by the time we hit our Series B financing, we had passed that spot. That was probably the most scary point to get there. The second one was proving that there was revenue. We felt pretty good that there would be revenue because we felt it was useful, but until you actually see someone taking out their credit card and paying you. Because one of the things that the journalists at the time were saying, look, you guys want to charge subscriptions. At the time, in 2003, like a few years before, the Wall Street Journal had just given up on subscription. They had tried to charge subscriptions. And the journalists were saying, okay, you guys are trying to charge subscription. The Wall Street Journal cannot charge subscriptions for them. Why do you guys think you will be able to do it?
But you were also freemium even then. You guys were kind of one of the first freemiums. There's always been a free tier for LinkedIn,
Well, it was only free. We started with the freemium not till we were 2 or 3 years into the thing because, we hadn't frankly just not built it and we were just focused on growth. And so it was kind of, we had pretty good belief it was going to work, but until you do it, you don't really know. And there were a couple different ways of who do we charge. There are a couple different audiences we were considering. There's a whole Harvard case study around that. So I'd say that was the second. So it's not just, people often take about, like it's a simple story, that's one. I'd say both of those. But after that, I think those were the major milestones. Then after that, it became just sort of like, in what order do you go after market? How fast do you grow? How do you trade different things off? And I'm sure it gets harder and harder. The bigger the markets get, you need to worry about scaling up your sales force and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, so, one time somebody has said to you, what's the success formula? You were at LinkedIn, you're a co-founder, like one of the most successful startups of our history. What is the success formula? And your answer was, I don't look at success formula, I look at fail formulas for the ones that don't work, which I think is really fitting for this place. What is the fail formula?
Well, I don't know, because I think it's really, I don't know if it's fitting, because I think it's almost like counterfeiting.
But what do you see as like, what do you see as a bad move?
Risks.
Let's put it this way, what do you see as a bad move that you tend to see companies making that you would call part of a fail formula?
Well, I can tell you, because what I'm trying to say is, which is often what people don't want to hear, is like, I can't point to one thing we did that made us successful and the other ones fail. But I can tell you for each of, we've had 30 or 40 competitors, and I can pretty much tell you with pretty good certainty what each of them did wrong. So to some extent I could say it's like, we didn't mess up in a major way, which sounds very antithetical to a startup. Like you're supposed to take risks and be, do this. And it's almost like, we did take risks, but we also avoided like a major failure. So major failures would be something like a company called 0 Degrees. They started slightly after us. They had a much better product than us. They built product much faster than us. But they were, with their viral growth, they kind of stepped over the line. They're kind of like Plaxo. Because they started a little after us, they were a little too aggressive, and people got too annoyed.
They were too spammy.
They're a little too spammy, and you just can't cross that line. I know some people feel LinkedIn crosses that line sometimes.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic you're saying it. I was just thinking that.
But on the overall thing, again, that's a few people. Overall, it has worked. You do have to have a certain aggressiveness, and it's often a few people who feel like that. If you are too aggressive, you get penalized. Just like 0 Degrees got penalized, Plaxo got penalized. On the social side, there are the Who's My Crush. There's been whole side of
even nowadays, apps. Actually, Apple goes after the apps that get too spammy with their marketing.
There was that LinkedIn competitor, Brain something, that was on Facebook that was growing. Oh yeah. You remember that one? They were growing and they were going to take on LinkedIn through Facebook.
They've closed.
Do you remember that one?
They closed down. Yeah.
So
that was Branch Out. Branch Out.
Yeah, that was a new Branch Out. That was not the original.
That was a new Branch Out.
That was a new Branch Out.
But it was Branch Out, and they got completely slammed by Facebook and are gone.
But they were growing like weed for a while.
That's right. Yeah. Well, so. I know that we're talking about all of this stuff from LinkedIn's early days. Ironically, you left the company in 2006.
Yeah.
So like in fact, December 2006. So we're like in the decade anniversary of your departure.
Yeah.
Do you, looking back now and looking at all of the stuff that LinkedIn has achieved in the last 10 years, and I know you have ideas about things they could be doing and stuff like that, just, you know, as somebody who knows the product, knows the people, knows all kinds of things, and is just a smart guy. I know you know. Do you think you left too early? Do you ever regret having left?
No,
Never?
I think the first years were the most exciting parts. Again, we got to profitability by that time. I think there's a lot of good things that happen, but that's for people who love other kinds of challenges, and I'm not that other kind of people. And I've had new and interesting challenges since then that, you know, were new to me. And I've been able to enjoy it, and they've done good work for the stock price, so
yeah.
I can't complain about that.
Yeah, I mean, you were, excuse me, up until Microsoft's acquisition offer, you've basically been a shareholder.
Yeah, yeah.
And so until the deal closes, you will be shareholder there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so now I just want to ask one other question, and then we have only a couple of minutes left, so
sure.
I'm going to try to figure out I had 3 pages of questions for you, which I haven't actually gone off the first page yet. As a person from Europe who then was educated in the States, built a startup in the US, which has been a complete home run, do you think that we're in a time now where you can build could you have built a LinkedIn out of Europe? Would it have been possible? We have a LinkedIn in Europe. It's called Zing, out in Germany, which is a bit of a dud.
Yeah.
No, it's not a dud, but you know, it never really achieved anything the way that LinkedIn has in terms of its growth. Do you think today you could build something like a LinkedIn in Europe?
Yeah, in fact, I think Zing could have been LinkedIn if they had pursued a different strategy.
What did they do wrong?
Well, I think they focused on the German market first, and they focused very quickly on profitability. And so when you do those things, and I think partly it is because they had investors who demanded profitability very quickly. So by the time they were ready to expand into other parts of the world, like the US, LinkedIn had already sewn up the US market. It was too late.
Right.
And they were sort of slowly expanding into Europe, but because LinkedIn had more of a free strategy, other European countries adopted LinkedIn. So then they tried to buy a couple other networks somewhere else, but when they started their pay model, very heavy pay model, so they weren't as aggressive as LinkedIn. So I do think there's no reason why...
You think today, though, a company is starting, do you think that we've got the funding structure here? Do you think that we've got the audience in Europe and the entrepreneurs to achieve that?
I kind of disagree with the question. I think you can start the company from here. It doesn't mean you have to have everything from here.
Right.
I think you pick and choose.
Right.
Right? If you find the right funders here, you go get them here. If you don't find them here, you go to Silicon Valley, you go to Asia, you go wherever you find them.
Yep.
Don't limit yourself of thinking, I'm from Europe, I need to get everything here.
No.
If you don't find the right talent here, you get some of the talent that you can get better here. Because certainly there's a big talent shortage in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
There are not enough developers, they're too expensive.
Yeah. There's a load of jobs that go unfilled every year.
You can probably get a lot better developers here. But maybe certain marketing or sales, especially if you're trying to sell to US corporation, you're going to find them better in the US.
Okay.
So go find, and again, who are the early adopters in scale? Now, maybe for some markets, they're in Europe. Maybe for some markets, they're in Asia. For a lot of markets, they're probably in the US. Mm-hmm. So you go wherever the right market is to start with. Just because you start in Europe doesn't mean your initial market is in Europe. Mm-hmm. And I think Germany has a particular problem with that, because Germany is kind of a bigger market. So German entrepreneurs often go for Germany as a first market, and then they get stuck there. I think, Finnish entrepreneurs or Danish entrepreneurs have an easier time, or Israeli entrepreneurs, because their markets are pretty small. So they're less tempted to sort of focus on the Israeli market and then go for Lebanon and for Jordania, right? They go more for the US market first. Right. So I think you can start here and just think about what makes sense. Think about yourself as a global company, and move to Palo Alto, one of the founders, and the other
Yeah.
founders stay here.
Yeah.
Go get your capital wherever it's there. Don't complain.
That's what Wunderlist,
Don't complain.
Wunderlist did that to an extent,
Yeah, Wunderlist stayed pretty local. I mean, they did.
Yeah, they stayed in Berlin, but the Christian went off to the U.S., I believe.
Yeah, they stayed pretty local, but but then there's the question: if in the U.S., do you go to Boston, New York, or do you go straight to Silicon Valley? So you have to do whatever it takes to be successful. You have to have that commitment, and don't worry about if the time zone is 6 hours or 9 hours.
Yeah.
Do what's right for the company to be a global success.
Yeah.
So absolutely, you can do that from here. You can do that from the Middle East as well, I believe.
Okay, I didn't get to ask you about LinkedIn in Russia. Get your opinion on that, but for another time.
All right.
But thank you so much.
Okay,
We're very
okay.
over time
All right.
now, so
All right.
thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.